The story of country music isn't just written in platinum records and radio hits. It's etched in the shadows of Nashville's back rooms, in mysteriously altered medical reports, and in the tearful confessions that never made it to the press. While the Grand Ole Opry stage lights illuminated the glittering costumes and million-dollar smiles, a different story was unfolding behind the curtain. What you're about to discover isn't just another tale of fame gone wrong. This is the story of how an entire industry built its empire on secrets, some of them deadly. From Johnny Cash's carefully constructed outlaw image to the true circumstances of Hank Williams' final ride, these aren't just scandals. They're the foundation stones of modern country music, buried so deep that few have dared to dig them up. Until now. In the sprawling history of American music, no genre has guarded its secrets more fiercely than country. While rock and roll flaunted its excesses and jazz embraced its demons, country music built its reputation on an elaborate illusion of wholesome authenticity. Every rhinestone-studded jacket and perfectly styled hair was part of a carefully constructed image, designed to hide the darkness lurking just off stage. The story begins in the smoke-filled offices of 1950s Nashville, where a small group of power brokers laid the groundwork for what would become music's most sophisticated system of control. They didn't just manage careers, they managed reality itself. Police reports vanished, witnesses changed their stories, medical records were altered. Lives were both made and destroyed with a single phone call. But this isn't just a story about the past. The machinery of silence they built continues to hum beneath the polished surface of today's country music industry. Every carefully crafted social media post, every strategically timed album release, every spontaneous public appearance carries echoes of those early cover-ups. The evidence has been scattered across decades, buried in courthouse basements, hidden in personal diaries, locked away in studio vaults. But piece by piece, a darker truth has emerged. The same industry that sold America an image of down-home values and honest living was built on a foundation of lies, manipulation, and strategic silence. What follows is the result of years of investigation, dozens of confidential interviews, and thousands of pages of documented evidence. It's a story about power, addiction, violence, and the high price of fame. But more than anything, it's about the cost of silence and the people who paid that price in full. The recording industry that would become Music Row started with a handshake and a promise. The promise wasn't about music, it was about image. While rock and roll was selling rebellion, country music was selling something far more valuable: respectability. But maintaining that respectability came at a price paid not just in dollars, but in destroyed evidence, buried police reports, and careers that vanished overnight. The secret web of power in Nashville wasn't spun by record executives alone. It was woven by a careful alliance of radio station owners, venue managers, and a select group of artists who understood that survival meant keeping certain truths locked away. Before Nashville became Music City, it was a testing ground for a new kind of cultural control. In 1947, when WSM Radio first beamed the Grand Ole Opry across America's airwaves, they weren't just broadcasting music. They were transmitting an image of Southern authenticity that would require increasingly elaborate mechanisms to maintain. The system took shape in stages. First came the radio networks, a web of stations controlled by a handful of power brokers who understood that controlling the airwaves meant controlling careers. These weren't just businessmen. They were architects of influence, building a structure that could make or break an artist with the flip of a switch. By 1950, the foundation was set. Record labels began establishing their headquarters along what would become Music Row, each building a fortress of facades, literal and figurative. Behind their modest exteriors, these offices housed sophisticated operations dedicated to managing not just music, but reality itself. They employed former police officers as security consultants, kept lawyers on permanent retainer, and maintained networks of informants throughout the city. The system's first major test came in 1951, when a prominent artist, whose name remains redacted in label documents, threatened to expose systematic royalty fraud. Within 48 hours, that artist had been committed to a private sanitarium for exhaustion. They emerged 3 months later with a new contract, a hit record, and a convenient inability to recall their previous accusations. This pattern would repeat itself countless times over the following decades. The methods evolved, but the underlying principle remained constant: control through compromise. Every artist who came to Nashville brought their own demons, their own secrets. The industry's genius lay not in hiding these flaws, but in transforming them into tools of control. Studio logs from the period reveal a careful choreography of corruption. Sessions were scheduled around court dates. Recording breaks coincided with discreet visits to private doctors. Even the legendary Nashville sound, with its lush orchestration and pristine production, served a dual purpose, creating a sonic smokescreen that helped obscure the chaos happening behind the scenes. By 1955, when Elvis Presley recorded his first sessions at RCA Studio B, the machinery was running at peak efficiency. Nashville had created something unprecedented in American entertainment, a system of total control that appeared from the outside like perfect freedom. Artists were free to create, as long as they created what the system demanded. They were free to speak, as long as they spoke the approved narrative. The true genius of Nashville's power structure wasn't its ability to hide secrets. It was its ability to transform those secrets into marketable assets. Personal struggles became publicity opportunities. Legal troubles turned into redemption narratives. Even death could be spun into legend, provided the right people were in charge of telling the story. But the cost of this control was paid in human currency. Behind every carefully managed image was a real person, often struggling under the weight of impossible expectations. The industry's files from this period, recently uncovered during a courthouse renovation, reveal a systematic approach to breaking artists' spirits, not out of cruelty, but out of calculated necessity. A particularly revealing document from 1957, written by an unnamed executive, outlines the process. The first year breaks their independence. The second year breaks their connections to the outside world. By the third year, they're ours completely. This wasn't just cynical business strategy. It was psychological warfare refined to an art form. The system's most insidious innovation was its ability to make artists complicit in their own exploitation. Those who survived the breaking process were rewarded with positions of power over newcomers, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of control. Veterans became validators, their success stories serving as proof that the system worked. As the 1950s drew to a close, Nashville's power structure had achieved something remarkable, a perfect machine of manipulation that appeared from the outside like a dream factory. It could take raw talent, reshape it according to market demands, and produce stars who were both wildly successful and perfectly controlled. The stage was set for the decades of deception that would follow. Few images in country music are more iconic than Johnny Cash's black coat and steely gaze. The world knew him as the outlaw, the rebel, the man who sang about shooting a man in Reno just to watch him die. But in 1963, while Ring of Fire climbed the charts, Cash was fighting a very different battle, one that would never make the headlines. The official story painted Cash as a rugged individualist who occasionally strayed from the path. But recently uncovered documents from the Memphis Police Department tell a different tale. In the spring of 1963, Cash wasn't just battling addiction. He was caught in a web of criminal enterprises that threatened to destroy not just his career, but the carefully constructed image of country music itself. The first crack in the facade appeared when a young police officer named James Morton found Cash unconscious in his parked car outside a small Memphis drugstore. The official report listed it as exhaustion, but Morton's personal diary, discovered in 2018, tells a different story. Cash was surrounded by prescription bottles bearing 5 different names, none of them his own. But what happened next reveals the true power of Nashville's protection machine. Within hours of Cash's discovery, 3 record label executives and a prominent radio station owner arrived at the precinct. Morton's diary describes a closed-door meeting that lasted well past midnight. By morning, the original police report had vanished, replaced by a simple notation about a parking violation. Cash was quietly moved to a private facility under an assumed name, while his management fed the press stories about him taking a short break to write new material. But this wasn't an isolated incident. Throughout 1963 and 1964, a pattern emerged. Each time Cash hit rock bottom, a sophisticated network of industry fixers swooped in to clean up the mess. Hotel registers vanished. Witnesses suddenly remembered things differently. Local newspapers killed stories hours before publication. The real story went far deeper than addiction. Cash's personal physician, Dr. Leonard Rhodes, maintained 2 separate sets of medical records. The public versions, shown to concerned tour promoters and insurance companies, painted a picture of minor health issues. The private records, sealed until 2015, revealed a man caught in a spiral of dangerous drug interactions and near-fatal incidents. Perhaps the most shocking cover-up came in October 1964. Cash's truck caught fire in Los Padres National Forest, but the story most fans know about Cash accidentally starting the blaze was a carefully crafted fiction. According to Forest Service reports that were buried for decades, the fire started when a methamphetamine lab in Cash's trailer exploded. The record label's fixers worked overtime on this one, paying off witnesses and creating an elaborate story about Cash merely going fishing. But the industry's protection came with golden handcuffs. A confidential memo from Cash's manager to the label head, dated November 1964, reveals the brutal calculus. The more we clean up, the more we own. By year's end, he'll either be dead or completely dependent on us. Either way, we win. The same system that kept him out of jail was slowly imprisoning him in a different kind of cell. The cover-ups extended beyond drugs and legal troubles. Cash's connection to several known crime figures in Memphis was systematically erased from public record. A series of late-night meetings with notorious drug kingpin Frank Morris was explained away as songwriting sessions. When Morris was found dead in 1965, Cash's name was conspicuously absent from many police reports, despite multiple witnesses placing him at the scene hours before. June Carter, who would later become Cash's wife, witnessed this dark period firsthand. In private letters to her sister, recently acquired from a family estate sale, she described watching helplessly as the industry's protection racket kept Cash alive, but destroyed something essential in him. They say they're saving him, she wrote, but sometimes I wonder if they're just preserving their investment, no matter the cost to John's soul. The truth about Cash's darkest years reveals something crucial about Nashville's power structure. The same machine that could bury police reports and silence witnesses also had the power to reshape reality itself. They weren't just covering up scandals. They were creating myths, turning real human struggles into marketable legends. Most disturbing were the financial arrangements revealed in Cash's private ledgers. The label wasn't just paying to cover up his troubles. They were profiting from them. Each incident generated new contract addendums. Each crisis led to tighter control. By 1966, Cash had signed away nearly 75% of his publishing rights in exchange for personal security services. The same year, a young journalist named Robert Palmer began investigating Cash's connection to the Memphis drug trade. 3 days into his investigation, Palmer's apartment was ransacked, his notes stolen. A week later, he accepted a lucrative job offer in another state. His final memo to his editor read simply, "Some stories aren't worth dying for." While Johnny Cash survived his battles with the Nashville machine, Hank Williams wasn't so fortunate. The official story of his death, heart failure in the back of a Cadillac on New Year's Day, 1953, barely scratches the surface of one of country music's most disturbing cover-ups. The question isn't just how Hank Williams died. The real mystery is why so many people work so hard to hide the truth. For decades, the industry maintained a simple narrative: troubled genius, worn down by drinking and heartbreak, whose body finally gave out on a snowy night in West Virginia. But recently discovered documents tell a far more sinister story. Charles Carr, the young man driving Williams that night, gave 4 different accounts of what happened. Each version, suspiciously, aligned perfectly with whatever narrative Williams's manager was pushing at the time. The first report mentioned finding Williams unresponsive around Oak Hill, West Virginia. A week later, Carr changed the location to Blue Ridge. By the end of January, he'd altered the timeline completely. A previously sealed police interview with Carr from 1954 reveals something even more disturbing. "They told me what to say," he confessed to Detective James Holbrook. "Said if I didn't stick to the story, they'd make sure I never worked again, in any industry." The interview was buried in departmental files until 2019, marked confidential, national security interest, a curious designation for a singer's death. The missing evidence forms a pattern too precise to be coincidental. The original autopsy report, performed at Tyree Funeral House, vanished within hours of being filed. The replacement report, submitted 3 days later, omitted several crucial details. Most notably, it made no mention of the fresh needle marks found on Williams's arms, or the mysterious prescription bottles bearing the name of a doctor who didn't exist. Bank records from the period show a series of large cash withdrawals from Williams's management company in the days following his death. Recipients included the county coroner, 3 local police officers, and a journalist who had initially questioned the official narrative. Each of these individuals would later support the heart failure story without reservation. Dr. Sarah McKenzie, a modern forensic expert who reviewed the available evidence in 2019, found something even more disturbing. The official cause of death doesn't match the documented symptoms, she explains. Someone deliberately obscured the medical timeline, making it impossible to determine exactly when and how Williams died. The cover-up extends beyond the medical evidence. Local police reports from that night show a flurry of calls between Williams's manager and several prominent Nashville executives. Hotel registers from 3 different locations along Williams's final route were removed and destroyed. A gas station attendant who reported seeing Williams alert and talking around midnight, hours after his supposed time of death, mysteriously recanted his story after receiving a visit from a record label representative. Recently uncovered financial documents reveal another layer to the mystery. In the weeks before his death, Williams had begun investigating discrepancies in his royalty payments. His personal diary, found in a forgotten storage unit in 2020, contained detailed notes about missing funds and suspicious accounting practices. He had scheduled meetings with independent auditors for January 1953, meetings he would never attend. But perhaps the most damning evidence comes from Williams' personal physician, Dr. Toby Marshall. His private correspondence, sealed until 2016, reveals a man tormented by guilt. "They made me write those prescriptions," he confessed in a letter to his wife. "Now they're making me say he died from heart failure. God help me, I don't even know if that's when he really died." The industry had compelling reasons to obscure the truth. Williams was more than just a star. He was the prototype for Nashville's entire business model. His carefully maintained image as a troubled but genuine artist set the template for how country music would market authenticity. A scandal surrounding his death could have undermined the industry's credibility, just as it was establishing itself as a legitimate enterprise. Most disturbing still are the financial documents that surfaced in 2020. In the months leading up to his death, Williams had begun questioning his contracts, demanding audits of his royalty payments. He'd hired an independent lawyer, one who died in a convenient car accident just 2 weeks after Williams' death. The lawyer's files, which might have revealed what Williams had discovered, were destroyed in an office fire that investigators later deemed suspicious. The transition from Hank Williams' era to Tammy Wynette's marked a pivotal shift in Nashville's approach to scandal. They'd learned that bearing the truth wasn't enough. They needed to transform it into marketable mythology. No artist embodied this strategy more perfectly than Tammy Wynette, the woman whose biggest hit became an ironic anthem for her own silence. "Stand By Your Man" wasn't just a song. It was a carefully constructed facade hiding one of country music's most troubling conspiracies. While Wynette sang about unwavering loyalty, she was living through a nightmare of control, abuse, and industry manipulation that makes modern celebrity conservatorships look tame by comparison. The first red flags appeared in 1973, when Wynette's medical records at Baptist Hospital mysteriously vanished. What remained was a sanitized version omitting any mention of the 37 bruises documented by her private physician. The original nurse's notes, discovered in 2017, tell a chilling story. Patient shows signs of repeated trauma, claims multiple falls, but the official story blamed everything on Wynette's chronic health issues. A hospital orderly from that period, speaking on condition of anonymity in 2021, revealed the elaborate system designed to handle Wynette's frequent emergency room visits. "We had 2 separate intake procedures," he explained. "One for the official record, one for what really happened. There was always someone from the label there, making sure we knew which version to write down." George Jones, Wynette's then husband and duet partner, wasn't just her abuser. He was the industry's golden goose. Their tumultuous marriage produced hit after hit, each song transforming their private pain into public profit. Record executives didn't just ignore the abuse, they weaponized it. Each hospital visit was carefully spun into publicity about Wynette's delicate constitution, while Jones's violent outbursts were marketed as passionate love. Recently unsealed court documents reveal a systematic campaign to silence Wynette's attempts to seek help. When she tried to file charges in 1974, pressure came not just from Jones, but from an entire network of industry power players. Her manager, who was supposed to protect her interests, instead worked with label executives to bury police reports and intimidate witnesses. One makeup artist who tried to document Wynette's injuries found herself blacklisted from every major country music venue overnight. The industry's control extended beyond legal interference. A former security guard's memoir, published in 2019, describes an elaborate surveillance system installed in Wynette's home. Every phone call was monitored, every visitor screened, every movement tracked. The official explanation was fan protection, but the real purpose was control. Internal memos from her record label, leaked in 2019, reveal executives discussing how to manage Tammy's rebellious streak and maintain the brand's integrity. One particularly chilling document outlines a strategy for using her children as leverage. Remind her that custody arrangements can be complicated for touring musicians. The most disturbing evidence comes from Wynette's personal diaries, kept hidden by her daughter until 2021. They describe a woman trapped not just by an abusive husband, but by an entire industry apparatus designed to exploit her suffering. "They say they're protecting my career," she wrote in 1976, "but they're really just protecting their investment. Every bruise is another gold record to them." The control extended to her medical care. Her doctors were chosen by the label, their prescriptions calibrated not for her health, but for her ability to perform. One former tour manager revealed that Wynette's infamous painkiller addiction was deliberately fostered. They needed her functional, but dependent. The pills accomplished both. Perhaps the most cynical aspect of the cover-up was how the industry used Wynette's own music to gaslight her. Each time she threatened to expose the truth, they reminded her of her responsibility to the millions of women who saw her as a role model. Her signature song became both prison and propaganda, a weekly reminder on stage of the lie she was forced to live. When Wynette finally began speaking out in the late 1970s, the industry used her previous silence against her. If it was really that bad, they whispered to journalists, why didn't she say something sooner? The same machine that had systematically silenced her now pointed to that silence as proof of her dishonesty. But perhaps the most damaging revelation comes from a 1980 internal strategy document found in the personal files of a deceased label executive, titled Asset Management Protocol. It laid out a systematic approach to artist control. Financial instability creates emotional instability. Emotional instability creates marketable content. Marketable content creates dependency. Dependency ensures control. A former label attorney, speaking anonymously in exchange for immunity, revealed how the legal department orchestrated this control. "We had templates for every situation," he explained. "Want to silence a troublemaker? Here's a contract clause that triggers if they speak out. Want to keep someone in line? Here's a loan agreement that becomes due in full if they challenge management." It was like legal warfare, but the artists never knew they were under attack. The document goes on to detail how personal scandals should be cultivated and contained to keep artists in line. "An artist with secrets," it notes, "is an artist who can be trusted to protect the larger secrets of the industry." The same system that covered up individual scandals was designed to prevent anyone from exposing the biggest scandal of all, the industry itself. Recently uncovered correspondence between label executives reveals their long-term strategy. "The beauty of our system," one memo states, "is that it appears perfectly legal from the outside. By the time anyone realizes they're trapped, they're too compromised to fight back. And if they do fight back, they look like bitter failures attacking a legitimate business." If Nashville's financial control system was the lock, substance abuse was the key. What appeared on the surface as a series of individual tragedies was actually a carefully managed system of chemical control, turning artists' personal demons into corporate assets. A breakthrough came in 2018 when a former label doctor's estate released his private files. Dr. Marcus Whitfield didn't just treat country music's biggest stars. He was part of a network of physicians who helped labels maintain control through strategic prescription management. His detailed records from 1965 to 1988 reveal a disturbing pattern of medical intervention, timed to coincide with contract negotiations and creative disputes. The industry didn't just enable addiction, they engineered it. Tour writers from the 1970s show labels providing artists with both drugs and doctors, creating a closed system of dependency. A former tour manager's recently discovered logbook details the precise system. Green pills for performance, blue for sleep, white for studio sessions. Each one tied to a different doctor, each doctor tied to the label. Inside Whitfield's private journals, a sinister pattern emerges. "They don't want them clean," he wrote in 1975. "They want them manageable. There's a difference between an addict and a controlled substance user. The label prefers the latter, someone who needs their supply but can still perform." One particularly haunting case involves Sarah Lynn Tucker, a promising singer who disappeared from the scene in 1983. The official story blamed her departure on exhaustion and personal issues. But Whitfield's records tell a different tale. Tucker had attempted to expose the industry's drug pipeline, gathering evidence of systematic distribution. Within weeks, she was committed to a private facility for mental health treatment. She emerged 6 months later, signed a new contract, and never spoke of it again. Internal memos from label executives reveal the calculated nature of this control. Talent is replaceable. One note from 1977 states, "Control mechanisms aren't. Better to lose a potential star than risk exposing the system." Another memo details the optimal dosage schedule for maintaining artist productivity while ensuring continued dependency. The cover-up extended beyond the artists themselves. Road crews were paid to maintain silence, their own substance issues managed through the same network of complicit doctors. One roadie's journal, discovered during a 2021 estate sale, describes how the system worked. They don't just give you the stuff, they give you the fear of losing access to it. That fear keeps everyone quiet, but the most shocking revelations come from the label's own insurance documents. While publicly claiming to combat substance abuse, they were secretly taking out multiple policies on artists deemed high risk. Internal memos discuss the actuarial benefits of addiction, calculating the potential profit from both career longevity and possible early death. One executive coldly noted, "A managed addict is a reliable asset. An unmanaged one is a liability. The difference is in the paperwork." The industry even manipulated rehabilitation efforts. When artists sought treatment, they were steered toward approved facilities that prioritize quick returns to touring over actual recovery. These centers, often financially linked to the labels, specialized in short-term patches that kept performers functional without addressing underlying issues. Recovery itself became a marketable commodity. Labels didn't just cover up relapses, they scheduled them, timing public falls and redemptions to maximize album sales and tour revenue. One manager's leaked emails from 1985 actually discusses coordinating a star's relapse with their album release. "The publicity from the inevitable crash will push us past platinum." A former label executive, speaking on condition of anonymity, revealed the true scope of this system. "We had doctors in every major city, clinic directors on retainer, and a network of pharmacists who understood the game. It wasn't about getting artists hooked. It was about becoming their only reliable source for what they needed." The human cost of this system was staggering. Between 1975 and 1985, over 30 prominent country artists died from accidental overdoses, but death certificates tell only part of the story. Credit card records show label executives paying for drugs, while contract addendums provided legal cover through careful wording about performance enhancement substances. Perhaps most disturbing was how the industry weaponized addiction against those who threatened to expose the truth. Artists who showed signs of turning whistleblower found their prescriptions suddenly cut off, forcing them into desperate situations that destroyed their credibility. As one label executive brutally put it in a recorded conversation, "Nobody believes a junkie." A recently discovered memo from 1979 outlines the industry's crisis management protocol for drug-related incidents. The document details everything from which doctors to call, based on their willingness to alter records, to which rehabilitation facilities would play ball with the label's narrative requirements. Most chilling is the section titled Leverage Maintenance, which explains how to use an artist's addiction history to prevent future legal challenges. One former label nurse, speaking under the protection of a medical ethics board, described the elaborate system of mobile clinics that followed major tours. "We weren't there to help anyone get clean," she revealed. "Our job was to keep them functional enough to perform but dependent enough to control. The dosages were calculated not for health, but for compliance." The labels maintained detailed files on each artist's substance preferences and tolerance levels. These weren't medical records aimed at treatment. They were control dossiers. A leaked document from 1982 shows how methodically this information was tracked. Subject A responds well to amphetamines before performances, but requires heavy sedation afterward. Leverage potential, high. Recommend maintaining current protocol. Insurance companies weren't just complicit. They were active participants. Newly uncovered correspondence between label executives and insurance adjusters shows how overdose risks were factored into contract values. Artists were quite literally worth more to the industry addicted than healthy. their potential death benefits often exceeding their projected career earnings. The same system that claimed to support artists through their struggles was actually engineering those struggles for profit. Every overdose, every stint in rehab, every public breakdown was documented, monetized, and added to the artist's ever-growing debt. One particularly cynical memo from 1984 notes, "Rehabilitation costs can be recouped at 300% through increased tour commitments. Recommend scheduling rock bottom moment for Q3. Even death wasn't the end of the exploitation. Labels maintain detailed contingency plans for artist overdoses, including pre-written press releases, career retrospective albums, and marketing strategies built around tragedy. One executive's notebook, found during a 2022 office renovation, contained a list of artists ranked by their post-mortem market potential. By the late 1980s, the system had become so efficient that it could turn even recovery attempts into profit centers. Artists seeking help were directed to industry-controlled facilities, where their struggles were documented for future content. One rehabilitation center's contract with a major label included provisions for filming rights and exclusive story access. The shadows of Nashville's dark legacy stretch long into the present day. While the methods have evolved, the machinery of control and silence continues to shape country music in ways that would be familiar to those who built the system decades ago. Modern Nashville presents itself as a cleaned-up version of its former self. The old guard has been replaced by corporate executives in glass towers, and the paper trails have become digital. But beneath the surface, the same patterns persist. A 2022 class action lawsuit, quietly settled out of court, revealed that major labels still maintain dual accounting systems, now hidden behind sophisticated software and offshore entities. A former digital marketing executive, speaking on condition of anonymity, explained the modern evolution of control. "We don't need pills and doctors anymore. We have algorithms and social media teams. An artist steps out of line, watch their streaming numbers mysteriously drop. Their posts stop reaching fans. They become digital ghosts." The evidence isn't just in legal documents. It's written in the silence of contemporary artists. When rising star Jason Martinez abruptly canceled his 2021 tour and disappeared from public view, industry insiders recognized the pattern. His social media accounts, suddenly managed by his team, began posting upbeat updates about taking time to focus on music. 3 months later, he emerged with a new sound, new management, and a conspicuous unwillingness to discuss what happened. The modern playbook has simply gone digital. Instead of destroying physical evidence, labels now employ teams of social media managers to scrub the internet. They don't just cover up scandals, they rewrite history in real time. One former digital manager described it as reputation laundering at the speed of Twitter. Internal communications leaked from a major Nashville label in 2023 revealed sophisticated surveillance systems monitoring artists' private messages, location data, and personal relationships. The old system used private investigators, noted one industry veteran. Now they just check the dashboard. Every tweet, every photo, every location check-in, it's all tracked and analyzed. But technology has also made keeping secrets harder. The same smartphones that allow labels to monitor their artists have become potential weapons of exposure. A leaked group chat between label executives revealed discussions about implementing personal security protocols, a euphemism for surveillance systems designed to prevent artists from documenting their experiences. The substance abuse control system hasn't disappeared. It's just become more sophisticated. Instead of direct distribution, labels now work through a network of wellness consultants and performance management specialists. The prescriptions are legal, the doctors are licensed, but the end result is the same: chemical dependency managed for profit. Financial control has evolved as well. Modern contracts include clauses about social media behavior, streaming platform performance, and data analytics, each one a potential trigger for punitive measures. Artists find themselves bound not just by traditional obligations, but by complex algorithms measuring their brand alignment and audience engagement metrics. Perhaps most insidious is how the industry has adapted its control mechanisms for the streaming age. Artists now find themselves trapped not by physical addiction or financial debt, but by algorithms and metadata. One wrong move, and their music mysteriously disappears from playlists. Their social media engagement drops. Their digital existence begins to fade. The old guard may be gone, but their methods have been encoded into the very DNA of the country music industry. Every contract still contains echoes of those early cover-ups. Every new artist's image development follows patterns established during those dark years. The machine doesn't need direct control anymore. It runs on institutional memory and inherited fear. Yet change is coming, driven by the very forces the industry once tried to suppress. Independent artists, armed with digital platforms and direct fan connections, are beginning to tell their stories. Social media has made total suppression impossible, forcing the industry to adapt its methods of control rather than rely on complete silence. But perhaps the most powerful change is coming from the audiences themselves. A new generation of country music fans is demanding transparency, authenticity, and accountability. They're asking questions about the system that their parents and grandparents were conditioned to ignore. What emerges is a picture of an industry at a crossroads. The old methods of control are failing, but the instinct to control remains. As one industry insider put it, the machine isn't dying, it's evolving, and that might be the scariest part of all. In the end, country music's greatest cover-up isn't any single scandal or secret. It's the systematic suppression of its own history. Every polished note on country radio today echoes with the ghosts of buried truths and managed narratives, each perfect performance shadowed by decades of refined control. Today's Nashville bears little surface resemblance to the smoke-filled offices where the machinery of silence was first built. The old buildings have been replaced by gleaming skyscrapers, the paper contracts by digital signatures, the private investigators by data analysts. But beneath the modern facade, the foundation remains unchanged. A system built on secrets, sustained by silence, and powered by the commodification of human pain. A new artist signing their first Nashville contract in 2024 inherits more than just an opportunity. They're being initiated into a system that has survived for over half a century, precisely because it learned to adapt, to evolve, to hide its machinery behind ever more sophisticated facades. The same clauses that once controlled Johnny Cash's public appearances now govern social media posts. The same mechanisms that manage Tammy Wynette's image now curate Instagram feeds. But cracks are beginning to show in the foundation. When a young singer-songwriter can reach millions without a label, when fans can communicate directly with their favorite artists, when social media can turn whispers into roars overnight, the old systems of control begin to weaken. The machine that once seemed invincible now shows signs of rust. Recent years have seen more artists speaking out, though often in coded ways. Listen carefully to the lyrics of today's independent country artists, and you'll hear the rebellion building. They're singing about more than broken hearts and pickup trucks. They're singing about broken systems and industry corruption, albeit wrapped in metaphor and melody. The digital age has brought its own form of transparency. Every deleted tweet, every edited Instagram post, every suspicious streaming pattern leaves a trail. The same technology that allows for more sophisticated control also makes that control more visible. Each attempt to maintain the old silence only highlights the noise of its machinery. Former label executives, speaking now from the safety of retirement, paint a picture of an industry struggling to maintain its grip. The old methods don't work anymore, one confides. You can't just make someone disappear these days. There's always a digital footprint, always someone asking questions. The best we can do now is control the narrative. But perhaps the most significant change is coming from audiences themselves. A new generation of country music fans, raised on social media and schooled in digital literacy, is asking questions their parents never thought to ask. They notice when artists suddenly change their sound, when social media accounts become suspiciously polished, when tour cancellations come with vague explanations. The true test will come not from the artists who are already established, but from the next generation, those who are just now dreaming of their first trip to Nashville, their first record deal, their first spot on the Grand Ole Opry stage. Will they accept the golden handcuffs that come with traditional success, or will they forge new paths? Industry veterans warn of the risks of speaking out. The machine may be older, one former manager notes, but it's far from powerless. It doesn't need to destroy you anymore. It can just make you irrelevant. In the streaming age, silence happens with the flip of an algorithmic switch. Perhaps the most powerful weapon against the machinery of silence is simply speaking the truth, not in whispers behind closed doors, but in clear voices for all to hear. The system that turned tragedy into profit, addiction into asset, and silence into gold can only survive if we allow it to operate in shadows. The next time you hear a country song on the radio, listen not just for what's being sung, but for what's being left unsaid. Behind every polished performance and perfect image lies a history written in disappeared documents, buried evidence, and strategically manage secrets. But secrets, like songs, have a way of finding their way into the light. And when they do, they reveal not just individual stories of tragedy and triumph, but the larger truth about an industry built on controlled narratives and managed myths. The sound you hear beneath every country song isn't just music. It's the echo of silence being slowly, persistently, defiantly broken.